Hello everyone and welcome to modding video number 2 for That Which Sleeps. I am on my third microphone now and I think this is the clearest yet. Alright, so nothing much has changed on our title screen except we now support Spanish, German, and Russian officially. You'll see those in the lower right. Let's jump into the editor. That was a loading screen. You won't often see it if you have a solid state drive, but if you do not, you will probably spend a lot of time reading our helpful descriptions of agents and their challenges. Today we're going to be going over the tags system in the back end, as well as adding an elite unit to the dwarves. We're doing this because we had a lot of discussion with people about war, elite units. People are very curious about it. We haven't had a chance to really show it off because we haven't had our up-to-date beta screens, but they are pretty much done at this point, so you'll be seeing them, so it's a good time to talk about elite units at the back end, how they work. And also we want to reinforce our dwarf army so they can conquer the world. Alright, so on this screen, a little small change. You see number of total mods and scenarios, and also how many are ready to actually go. For mods, we have 4 to 12. It's the ones that have a check mark. Dwarves are not ready to go. We'll see why in a second. Click on that. You'll see that races is in red, and races added 0 out of 1. That's telling you that the race cannot be used right now, so it won't let you actually play this mod. The reason is because a race without a culture cannot be used. Races don't need governments, you don't need domination. As long as they have a culture, at least one to choose from, then they can spawn into the world through events. Without that, you can't use them. Now, let's jump in and talk about tags before we go into units. Now, the tag system is interesting. Most games generally have attributes per type. So if you're talking about traits or you're talking about cultural types, you're going to have a tag for that has a specific meaning inside of it. We threw that out because we wanted to have something that was easy to mod, far-reaching, and allowed for a lot of emergent opportunities. So the tag system is universal. They can get a little messy, and it's actually hard for a modder the first few times to understand what actually happens between these. But it's great because random things can occur, and we'll go over that in a few seconds to figure it out. So looking at what we have here, you can see a bunch of them that are clearly attack types, a few that are races, things like that. Let's just click on one so we can see what the settings are. But let's talk about how it works. So you see AI as one of the first checkboxes. If you check AI, it means that the AI will interpret this tag inside of the world and try to respond to it. That's pretty important. So if someone hates someone else, and they see they have a lot of a certain tag, they will begin to hate that tag. They will hate things like that. It can also create sympathies between certain things. So someone has a lot of elf tags and they're not elf, they might have more sympathy towards elvish things. You'll also see in the old one name system is where the is one of the big points of interaction. So if you associate occult with one of the names and holy with the names, and you see more of that, sages will research that and they'll begin to conclude these occult and holy acts are coming at much more regular intervals. It's probably this name is returning, and they'll use it as a basis for their research. And that can be anything. You can throw abandoned, cursed, heroic into the name, and as those show up, I mean, you should associate that with your old one so it actually makes sense. And as those show up, they'll begin to research and figure it out. They'll also try to research countermeasures, and the extent to which they can have a countermeasure depends on the tag itself. Some of them have binary relationship with other ones, like the elements. Others do not, but can in fact be their own defense. We'll get into that in a second. So let's look at damage types, so we can talk about that. Damage type, cold, lightning, shadow, these things will all be damage types. But you can make anything a damage type. You could have a dwarf damage type. If you did dwarf damage, it would do basic damage to the other defended by dwarf defense, which presumably no one would have because that doesn't make any sense. So if you did 2 dwarf damage, it would first check the dwarf defense, and then it would go as usual, unless you coded something explicitly in, against physical, with each point of physical counting as half a point of defense. So to defend against 2 dwarf, or 2 freak, or 2 orc, any tag you want to add to it, it would take double the amount. Now, what's interesting is once this becomes a damage type, and people start seeing this damage, if they say, oh, I'm being attacked by a lot of dwarf damage over time by the old one, they will actually develop dwarf defense. So that's another way in which the AI tries to react. They'll look for artifacts that have dwarf defense. They'll do other actions like that to try and develop them. They'll actually teach their units how to defend against that type of damage. Magic type is the third one down. This is an extension of that as well. It operates very similarly in that they'll try and research it, but now it plugs into the lore system. So once you make, let's say you had artifact, no, that's not a good one, holy magic. So holy magic, if you made holy magic and you put it into the lore system and you put it onto magic items, they'll research it, they'll find it inside ancient ruins that are associated with it, develop the magic items that are associated with it, they'll add holy to their spells. So if you had, if spirit armor is one of the spells in the game, and gives you spirit defense, you can actually have it add holy defense if that's a magic type. So they would research it, alter it, and add holy defense to it. Group only is if you want to use it internally. Once you have giant mods, you're going to use tags for all sorts of things, including just sorting. I use them all the time for sorting through different groupings. So group only means it won't show up in the game. No one playing the game will ever see this tag, even if it's on something. It's just for you in the back end. Race, of course, means it's a race. It's pretty self-explanatory. So that's a tag. They do have a lot of specific interactions in specific areas, so inside of lore and everything, but we'll go over those as we go through the area itself. So let's change that, and you'll see when we jump back, remember that in the bottom, these are all links, this breadcrumb trail. I'm at tags, I want to go back to options, I click on options, I'm back there. You'll see tag modified 1/1. It doesn't care if I've changed the tag. That's fine. It would now be considered colder everywhere throughout it. Alright, so let's do elite units. So if I click, it's the same as everything, which is where we put it in a grid as wide as your screen. You can scroll up and down to see what's available, or you can use the search. So elite units, talking about combat for a bit. We've talked about it before, but I know we haven't been able to show people really how it works, and it's difficult to explain without showing. So on the strategy map, really what you're looking at is a game of cutting people out of supply and pinning armies down and trying to flank them, and it's very slow. The combat plays out over many, many turns. You can bog someone down somewhere and have a pitched battle with them, just a war of attrition for 10, 15 turns possibly. Or that person might skirmish in the woods and just fight a guerrilla battle. So there's a lot of options there. Cutting armies out of supply is a very viable way to handle this, to flank them, make sure they have no supply. They can loot territories. But if you want to change the battle and try and manipulate it, you're going to rely on elite units. So if you want to not get pinned down, if you want to punch through the enemy without having to sit there for 3 or 4 turns, you're going to want to have the proper unit to take them down. So let's look at elite units. There's a ton here. Keep in mind these are generic elite units. Once they're in the map, once they're in the game, they'll have a specific name. They can be led by heroes and agents, and they will have unique powers. They aren't always just, it's not as if you're recruiting a unit, like, oh, I'm recruiting an archer. You're going to recruit, the 8th Archer Contingent, or the Heroes of the North, and someone's going to join it. They're going to have different abilities based on that, and they will grow over time. So let's make ourselves a Dwarg elite and also check out the statistics. So here we are looking at Giants. So Giants are one of the best units you can get in the game. You can have them as a minion as well, but they have a giant profile, so it's a big detriment. So anyway, let's look at the stats and talk about those. Melee, shock, range, formation, discipline, horror, siege, skirmish, health, and will. So these numbers will boost your army stats, but they also represent the giant when he does his when he takes his actions inside of combat. So when you have an elite unit, you don't always use him. If you choose to use that elite unit, you're deploying it, it will alter the way the combat flows. Normally combat just goes back and forth, attack, defense, attack, defense. Usually it's something simple like archers fire, soldiers go forward, the lines hold, the lines hold, the lines hold. And this breaks up that monotony by using special actions. But let's go over the numbers first. So melee, before that, shock and formation. So shock versus formation. Shock is, think of it as a cavalry charge hitting the lines. So the shock is an attempt to break through a formation. Formation resists shock. If formation resists shock, that's pretty much it. Nothing happens. A few people will die on either side. It's not a big deal. If, however, formation is broken, it becomes a melee. Both sides use their melee value to do damage to each other. Range goes first before that. Generally, it's pretty weak. Discipline versus horror. So a lot of games use shock and similar things to represent damage against morale. We have horror for that because this is a fantasy game with a lot of terrifying elements in it. So horror will strike against discipline, and discipline also is checked against a few other things. and that can reduce the overall morale of the army. Elite units don't have morale, they have willpower. So even if an army's morale falls, an elite unit can rally or stay behind and inflict some lasting damage as the army retreats. Siege value is used in siege combat, which is a big part of the game. Skirmishing is interesting. It's not like on other games where skirmishing is either a first attack or a last attack. Skirmishing is, like I was talking about before, you can fight a guerrilla battle inside of a point of interest. And instead of fighting a pitched battle, your little army of skirmishers will just sit there and continually attack the other army. And it's very hard for them to actually pin you down. They'll try and hunt you down. Depending on their values, they may or may not find you. And your skirmishing value. Health and will is for this particular elite unit. So those are the numbers. The numbers don't tell the whole story, though. The story comes from the combat traits. So the battles, as I was saying, it's attack, defense, attack, defense, attack, defense, but that can be broken up. Which instead of a regular attack, overwhelming, for instance, allows the giant to simply smash through someone's lines. So if they don't have a special trait that lets them stop it, overwhelming will crush through the lines and then will cause an event that I believe that it's called In the Wake of Beasts. So that allows all your footmen infantry to just go at them with a melee. So it negates all formation for the opposing lines. There's no way to stop that unless you have an elite unit of your own, or the enemy does, that can stop overwhelming. Gargantuan is more of a basic one. It gives you can walk over rivers, you can attack flying creatures. Wallbreaker is fun. Wallbreaker is if you are not countered when you attack the walls. So if a giant attacks the walls, it triggers a special event. If he's not countered by anything, he will destroy the walls. Normally, sieging can take a very long time. Having a giant makes things much, much easier. So let's make a dwarg version of giants. That makes sense. Click on copy. That's the way I usually do it. You'll see another one of the same picture has appeared below. Giant dwarg. You're going to want to change the race. Like I said, there's tons of tags. You don't want to just scroll through them, so you want to be searching as much as possible. Now he's a dwarg. And that right there, what you saw, is a big part of how the editor works and how I think it works very efficiently, is that it uses that bottom half of the screen for whatever you're drilling into. So you drill down with left click, drill out with right click. It's the same for everything inside the editor. So once you get used to it, which can take a little while, it becomes very easy, very quick to use. Now let's look at combat traits. So if I add a combat trait, there's a ton of them. A lot of them trigger their own special events, and like I said, battle's all about you want opportunities and you want breakthroughs. Those are both big deals in battle and ways for you to crush the enemy army and continue through. But others are just flat benefits. Wicked Bolts, for instance, which is here. Wicked Bolts lets you do your horror when you do your ranged attack. Flight is pretty self-explanatory. Commando is interesting. A big part of the game is not just crushing the front lines, but it can also be breaking through and doing something to the enemy. So Commando lets you break through the lines personally. You don't break through for everyone. Just that elite unit breaks through with whatever heroes and agents are there, and then you can burn their siege trains, you can try and kill the commander, stuff like that. Assassin's great. If you get through with an assassin, so usually you want to pair assassin up with something else. So Assassin Commando, for instance, if you break through with assassin, you can kill the enemy commander almost always. So we're going to give that to the giant dwarg, because that's going to be hilarious. Now we have an overwhelming gargantuan wallbreaker assassin. That's something you would never see inside the game normally. You could create it by using the Hordemaster special ability, which lets you take an ability from one unit and give it to another, but of course that takes a lot of time. This, if it was a basic unit, a giant dwarg that was an overwhelming assassin, because overwhelming almost always goes over anything, this would be incredibly powerful. So that's good for the dwarves. Okay, so we're going to stop for now. We've made a giant dwarg. Our next one's going to be going over culture and skills, and then we're going to go ahead and create the nation and put it on the map. Alright, till next time.